Daniel Hale had never imagined his life would shrink down to a single-dollar bill, folded and worn, hiding in the corner of his wallet like a shy secret. But that was all he had left on this hot, dusty afternoon in a small Arizona town. He had arrived with nothing but a backpack, a cracked phone that barely turned on, and a mind full of regrets he didn't dare count. The sun above him felt heavy, as if it were pressing him deeper into the dirt road he walked on. Even the air seemed tired, filled with the smell of warm sand and gasoline from the old highway. He had drifted into the town earlier that morning, telling himself he would only stay long enough to rest under some shade and figure out his next move. But next move was a strange phrase for him. Daniel had been drifting for so long that choosing a direction felt like choosing a new identity. And he wasn't sure he had one left. As he neared a small roadside station, a single building with faded paint and a flickering sign, he noticed a little girl sitting on the wooden bench outside. She looked about 9 or maybe 10, barefoot, her long dark hair falling like a curtain over her face. Her clothes were simple and dust-covered, as if she had been walking a long time. She sat very still, too still for a child, and she held her knees close to her chest as though trying to make herself small. Daniel felt a faint worry rise inside him. Children didn't usually sit alone outside stations, in the middle of the afternoon heat. He slowed his steps, trying not to look like he was staring. But he couldn't help noticing the quiet around her. Even the buzzing insects seemed to avoid her space. He walked inside the station first, pretending he had business there. The place smelled faintly of old chips and cool air from an overworked fan. A middle-aged clerk stood behind the counter, flipping through a magazine. Daniel looked around at the shelves, not really sure what he could buy with $1. But the gnawing dryness in his throat reminded him that even a small bottle of water would help. He reached for the cheapest one he could find and checked the price. Too high. He returned it and picked up a tiny snack pack instead. Still too high. He sighed. Maybe he would just sit somewhere and rest without buying anything. But when he turned toward the door again, he saw the girl through the dusty window. She hadn't moved at all. Something about her stillness made him pause. He looked at the clerk and asked gently, "Do you know the girl outside?" The clerk barely lifted his eyes. "Apache kid. They pass through sometimes." Quiet. Not my business. Daniel nodded slowly. It wasn't really his business either. But the girl's small frame and the way she held herself touched something in him. Something he had tried not to feel for a long time. Concern. He stepped outside again, and the heat wrapped around him like a blanket. The girl kept her gaze on the ground, as if expecting the earth to tell her something important. Daniel hesitated, unsure if he should speak. He didn't want to frighten her or make her uncomfortable. But he also couldn't walk away without checking if she was all right. He approached slowly and sat on the far end of the bench, leaving plenty of space between them. "Hi," he said softly. She didn't look up at first, but her shoulders lifted slightly, as though she heard him. "It's really hot today," Daniel continued. "Do you have water?" She shook her head. Just once. Daniel felt that small twist in his heart again. He had $1 left, his last bit of safety. His last option for food or travel. But looking at the girl, he knew what he had to do. He stood up, walked back inside, and searched again. This time, he found a small bottle of water on sale. The only thing he could afford. He placed his last dollar on the counter, the bill leaving his fingertips like a goodbye. The clerk barely looked. When Daniel returned outside, he held the bottle out to the girl. "Here," he said gently. "You should drink something." The girl finally looked up. Her eyes were dark, clear, and full of something Daniel couldn't quite name. Perhaps tiredness, or uncertainty, or maybe something deeper. She accepted the bottle without a word and opened it slowly, as though she wanted to be sure it was really meant for her. She drank in small sips, careful and polite. Daniel watched her quietly, not wanting to rush her. When she finished, She held the bottle tightly in her hands, as if it were something precious. "What's your name?" Daniel asked softly. She hesitated before answering in a voice almost too quiet to hear. "Alina." "That's a beautiful name," Daniel said with a gentle smile. "I'm Daniel." She nodded, her expression softening a little. But she didn't smile. It seemed like smiling wasn't something she had done recently. Daniel looked around, trying to understand her situation. "Are you waiting for someone?" Alina shook her head again. "Do you live near here?" Another shake. Daniel felt a small weight settle in his chest. He didn't want to ask anything too personal or make her feel nervous, but it was clear she was alone, and he couldn't understand why. He leaned back slightly, speaking in a relaxed tone. "It's okay if you don't want to talk. I just want to make sure you're safe." The girl looked at him again, studying him carefully. It was the kind of look people gave when they weren't sure if they could trust someone, but they wanted to. Daniel didn't know what she saw in him. He only hoped she saw kindness. After a long moment, she said quietly, "I need to go home." Daniel nodded. "Where is home?" She pointed toward the distant hills and mountains, far beyond the town. "There." He followed her finger with his eyes. The land stretched out endlessly towards soft blue shapes rising in the distance. The reservation, he guessed. It would be a long walk, for a child, alone. "Did you walk all this way?" he asked. She gave a tiny nod. Daniel looked down at the dust-covered ground, imagining the miles she must have crossed. His heart ached for her, though he didn't fully understand her story yet. He rubbed his hands together, thinking. He had no money left, no ride, no plan. But he had 2 working legs, a good sense of direction, and a simple rule he had tried to keep even when life was messy. Leave people better than you found them. He stood slowly. "If you want," he said carefully, "I can walk with you for a while. Only if you're comfortable with that." Alina watched him with those calm, deep eyes again. For a moment, Daniel thought she might refuse, but then she nodded, very gently. And just like that, something shifted inside him. He didn't know it yet. But this small choice, giving his last dollar to a child who needed it, would change the entire direction of his life. They started walking side by side, quiet at first. The world around them felt wide and open, the sky huge, the road stretching endlessly ahead. Daniel had always believed he was the one running from the world. But, as he walked with Alina, he realized something new. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't running. He was simply walking forward. And the girl beside him, with her silent strength and deep, thoughtful gaze, would soon teach him more about freedom than he had ever understood. Daniel and Alina walked away from the small roadside station and followed the wide dirt path that led out of the town. The afternoon sun had softened a little, though it still carried its warm, steady weight. Daniel kept his steps slow so the girl didn't have to hurry. She stayed only a few feet away from him, close enough to show she wanted his company, yet still keeping a quiet space of her own. For a while, they walked without speaking. Daniel didn't want to push her with too many questions. He knew what it felt like when people asked things before you were ready to answer. So he simply let the silence stretch between them, peaceful and unforced. After several minutes, Alina glanced at him briefly, as if checking to see if he was still there. Daniel gave her a small, friendly smile. She didn't smile back, but she didn't look away immediately either. The land around them slowly changed as they moved farther from the town. The noise of cars faded behind them. The air felt cleaner, filled with the scent of dry brush and warm earth. Small plants dotted the ground, and the distant mountains still waited, like old guardians watching over the land. Daniel looked ahead, shading his eyes with his hand. "Is it far?" he asked softly. Alina nodded. "Yes. Do you know the way?" She nodded again, more confidently this time. Daniel trusted her. Even though she was young, she carried herself like someone who understood her land, much more deeply than he did. She moved with a quiet certainty, as if the path under her feet was familiar, even comforting. As they walked, Daniel noticed that Alina often watched the sky or the ground, paying attention to things he wouldn't normally notice. She looked at animal tracks in the dust, the shape of clouds, the direction of the wind. She seemed to read the world like a book. He finally spoke again, gently. "You left home alone?" Alina hesitated. Her fingers tightened slightly around the empty water bottle she carried. "I had to," she said softly. Daniel felt a small pull in his chest. He didn't want to make her repeat anything painful, so he asked his next question carefully. "Were you trying to find someone?" She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No. I was trying to stay with someone." That answer told him enough. He didn't need details yet. The important thing was she was heading back to the person she wanted to be with. They continued walking in comfortable quiet until Alina asked her first question of the day. "Why are you walking?" she asked, looking up at him with steady eyes. Daniel chuckled softly. "Good question," he said. "I guess I didn't have anywhere else to go." She studied him the same way she studied the land, calm, thoughtful, without judgment. "You don't have a home?" she asked. Daniel scratched his neck awkwardly. "Not really. Not right now, at least." Alina didn't seem surprised. She simply nodded as if that answer made sense to her. Then she continued walking, her small feet lightly touching the ground. After a few minutes, she spoke again. "Everyone has a home. Maybe you forgot yours." Daniel blinked, taken aback by her words. For a child, she spoke with a clarity that made him quiet inside. He wondered if she understood how deeply her sentence touched him. He had been drifting for so long that he had stopped thinking of home as something real. But to her, home wasn't a building or a city. It was a feeling, something she believed everyone carried, even when lost. "You're pretty wise," Daniel said. Alina didn't respond, but he saw a tiny shift in her expression, almost like she was pleased but didn't know how to show it. As the sun dropped lower, the shadows of the distant mountains stretched across the land. Daniel could feel the air cooling, and he was glad. Walking under the softer sky felt easier. They made their way along a narrow road that curved gently between low hills. The world felt open, but not empty. Quiet, but not lonely. After some time, Daniel decided to ask something else. "Alina, how long were you at that station?" She looked forward as she answered. "Since morning." "Did anyone talk to you?" "No." Daniel pressed his lips together. Even though he didn't want to think badly of strangers, he couldn't help feeling sad that a child sat alone all day and no one asked if she needed help. He didn't want to blame the people in the town, maybe they didn't know what to do. But still, it felt wrong. He hoped his presence made her feel a little safer now. They reached a wider, flat stretch of land, where the road split into two directions. Alina pointed left. "This way." Daniel followed her. "You really do know the path." "My grandmother taught me," she said quietly. "She sounds like someone really important to you." Alina nodded without hesitation. "She is." Daniel smiled softly. "I'm glad you're going back to her." A small silence settled between them again, but this one felt warm, not heavy. They kept walking, and Daniel noticed something else about Alina. She seemed to listen to everything. Not just sounds, but feelings. When wind passed over them, she closed her eyes for a moment, as if she understood something inside it. When a bird chirped far away, she paused slightly, as if the sound meant something. It was a kind of awareness Daniel had never had. He usually walked through the world, watching only his own steps. But she seemed to walk through it, watching everything. He admired that about her. As evening approached, the sky turned soft shades of gold and pink. The desert looked almost magical under the changing colors. Daniel took a deep breath. "This place is really beautiful," he said. Alina nodded. "It is our land." Daniel felt the meaning behind her words. Not just ownership, but connection. Real connection. The kind that came from history and memory. They walked until the sun dipped low behind the mountains. Daniel looked around. We should rest soon, he suggested gently. Alina agreed with a small nod. They found a spot near a cluster of rocks where the ground was smooth and cool. Daniel set down his light backpack and sat on the earth. Alina sat nearby, still holding her empty water bottle, though she seemed less tired than he expected. He glanced at her again. The gentle way she sat, the calmness in her eyes, the silence that wasn't uncomfortable at all. You're really brave, he said softly. She didn't respond at first. Then she looked at him, her expression serious. I wasn't brave. I was scared. But I had to go. Daniel nodded slowly. Being scared and still going, that is bravery. Alina looked away as if thinking about his words. The sky slowly turned deeper blue. And the first stars appeared. Daniel leaned back on his hands and looked up. It had been a long time since he paused to truly look at the night sky. Somehow, the stars felt bigger out here, brighter, like they were watching over the land the same way Alina's people did. Do you miss your grandmother? He asked softly. Yes, Alina said with a steady voice. She tells stories at night. I listen. She says stories are like paths. They show us where we come from. Daniel felt a soft ache inside. I wish I had stories like that. You do, Alina said simply. You just forgot them. Her words hit him again with surprising depth. She spoke like someone who understood people, not just land. Daniel realized she wasn't only learning on their walk. She was teaching him without even trying. They sat quietly, resting, letting the gentle night settle over them. After a few minutes, Alina said something that made Daniel straighten softly. I didn't want to leave her, she whispered. Daniel understood. Then let's get you back, he said. We'll keep walking tomorrow. I'll stay with you until you're home. Alina looked at him again. And for the first time since he met her, he saw something new in her eyes, trust. She gave the smallest nod, and Daniel felt something inside him calm. He didn't know what waited ahead or how far they had to go, but he knew he wasn't walking alone anymore. And as the quiet night spread across the land, Daniel realized that the little girl beside him wasn't just guiding him through the desert. She was guiding him back to himself. Daniel woke up slowly as the soft morning light spread across the desert. The sky was still pale, touched with hints of pink and gold. A soft breeze moved over the land, bringing the coolness of early day. He stretched gently, aware of the firm ground beneath him. It wasn't the most comfortable place to sleep, but surprisingly, he had slept better than he expected. Alina was already awake. She sat a few feet away, her small back straight, her eyes watching the horizon as if she were waiting for something only she could see. Her calmness made the morning feel peaceful. Daniel smiled quietly and dusted off his clothes. Good morning, he said softly. She turned and nodded. Morning. Daniel looked at her for a moment. There was something steady about her, something strong. Despite her young age, she moved with a quiet confidence, as though she belonged to the land in a way he never had. He wondered what it must feel like to walk through a place and know it was part of you. He stood up and glanced around. We should start walking soon. It'll get hot later. Alina picked up the empty bottle she still carried and nodded again. Then she began walking toward the path without needing directions. Daniel followed her, trusting that she knew the way. Their footsteps made soft prints in the sand. The desert looked different in the morning. Light, gentler, almost welcoming. Birds sang somewhere nearby, and a rabbit darted across the path ahead of them. Alina watched it with quiet interest before continuing forward. After a little while, Daniel spoke. You're really good at finding the way. Quote, My grandmother taught me how to watch the land, she said simply. The land has signs. You only need to learn how to see them. Daniel looked around. To him, the desert looked like endless hills of sand and brush. But to her, it seemed like a map full of messages. "What kinds of signs?" he asked. She pointed lightly. "The wind, the shape of the hills, the way plants grow, tracks from animals, even the sky tells things." Daniel tried to see the world the way she did, but it would take time. Still, hearing her talk about it made him feel strangely grounded, like he was learning something old and valuable. As they continued walking, they passed a long stretch of dry land where small plants grew in patterns. Alina stopped for a moment and touched one of the plants gently. She didn't pick it or move it, just placed her hand on it lightly. "What does that plant mean?" Daniel asked. "It grows where the ground is soft," she explained. "There might have been water here in another season." Daniel nodded. "You know a lot." She shrugged in a shy way. "My grandmother says knowing the land is like knowing a friend. You learn more the longer you walk with it." Daniel smiled. "Maybe I'll learn a little too." "You will," she said without hesitation. They walked for another hour. The sun climbed slowly, warming their path. The heat was not harsh yet, just gentle. Daniel felt grateful for that. His legs were getting tired, but he didn't complain. He didn't want Alina to worry. Eventually, they reached a small hill. Alina lifted her hand and pointed. "We need to go around it. There is a safe path on the right side." Daniel followed her direction. As they walked along the edge of the hill, he noticed the ground had faint tracks, small, light footprints, and the marks of a walking stick. "Someone else passed here?" he asked. "My people walk here sometimes," she said. "It's one of the old paths." Daniel felt a quiet respect. He imagined generations of people walking these same routes, guided by the same land, the same sky. It gave him a sense of time that made his own problems feel smaller. After a while, Alina slowed down a little. Daniel noticed immediately. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, but her steps were a bit slower. She wasn't tired, she was thinking. He could see it in her eyes. After a few moments, she spoke. "My grandmother tells stories about this land." Daniel listened closely. He loved hearing her speak, not only because her words were simple, but because they carried meaning. "What kind of stories?" he asked. "Stories about how the land remembers everything," she said. "She says the land holds the steps of our people. The songs, the old ways, even the wind knows the stories." Daniel felt something warm inside him. "I would like to hear one." Alina thought for a moment. Then she began speaking in her soft, steady voice. "My grandmother says there was a woman long ago who walked this same path," she said. "She walked from village to village, carrying a basket of gifts. She brought seeds to plant, and small wooden animals carved by her people. She said each gift was a promise that we would always belong to the land and to each other." Daniel listened closely. "What happened to her?" "She walked for many years," Alina said. "Wherever she went, children followed her footsteps. They learned the stories she told. And even now, my grandmother says you can feel her on this path. Her kindness stayed in the land." Daniel felt a gentle shiver. Not fear, just a deep sense of connection. Alina nodded. "Stories help the land remember." He looked at her gratefully. "Thank you for telling me." She gave a small nod and continued walking. Daniel felt strangely peaceful, as if the story wrapped around him like a warm blanket. As the day grew brighter, they reached a small shaded area under a cluster of rocks. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at Alina. "Let's rest for a bit." She agreed and sat down lightly on the smooth ground. Daniel sat beside her, stretching his legs. The shade felt cool against his skin. He pulled out his backpack and checked inside. There wasn't much, just a few things he had collected along the way. But he found a small packet of nuts he had forgotten about. He opened it and held it out. Want some? He asked. Alina looked at the packet, then back at him. Are you hungry too? A little, he admitted. We can share. She accepted a few nuts politely and ate quietly. Daniel smiled. He didn't feel hungry anymore. There was something about helping her that made him feel full in a different way. After resting, they continued their journey. Daniel noticed something as they walked. He was beginning to see the land differently. He watched the direction of the wind. He noticed how the plants leaned. He even spotted a trail of tiny footprints and pointed them out. Alina looked at him approvingly. Daniel laughed quietly. I'm trying. They shared a soft moment of calm. By late afternoon, the mountains grew closer. The shapes were clearer now, no longer just distant outlines. Daniel felt a small spark of hope inside him. They were making real progress. How much farther? He asked. Alina looked at the mountains carefully. Maybe 2 more days, she said. Maybe less. Daniel nodded. That felt manageable. As they walked, Daniel realized something else. He was no longer thinking about where he would go after this, or what he had lost, or what waited behind him. For the first time in months, he wasn't worried about the past or the future. He was simply present, walking beside a girl who trusted him, learning from a land that welcomed him, feeling like he belonged to something, even if just for a moment. When evening came and the shadows stretched long across the ground, Alina stopped and looked at Daniel. You walk like someone who is not running anymore, she said softly. Daniel felt warmth touch his chest. Maybe I'm not, he said. And as the sky turned golden around them, he realized she was right. For the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't running from anything. He was walking toward something peaceful, something honest, maybe even something like home. Daniel and Alina started walking early the next morning, long before the sun rose high enough to warm the desert. The air felt cool and gentle around them, carrying the soft scent of earth that had rested through the night. The mountains were much closer now, standing tall and calm in the distance. Their shapes were clearer, and Daniel felt as though they were quietly welcoming Alina home. He walked beside her, matching her small steps. The sky slowly brightened behind them, painting pale colors across the horizon. Soft gold, light pink, a hint of purple fading into blue. Daniel had never watched a sunrise like this before, at least not with such peaceful eyes. It made the world feel wide, but safe. Alina seemed more hopeful today. There was a lightness in her steps, and she looked toward the mountains with steady focus, as though she could already feel her grandmother's presence waiting somewhere beyond. Daniel finally asked, Do you think your grandmother knows you're coming back? Yes, Alina said with certainty. She always knows. Daniel smiled a little. She must care about you very much. She does, Alina said simply. She taught me everything. She says caring is like a circle. What you give comes back to you. Daniel thought about that. He had spent years giving almost nothing, keeping to himself, avoiding people, avoiding places that felt too close. Maybe he had broken his own circle. After a long stretch of silence, Alina spoke again. She always tells me that freedom is not about going anywhere you want. It is about being able to stay where your heart feels quiet. Daniel listened carefully. He felt those words settling deep inside him. He had spent so much of his life drifting, thinking freedom meant movement. But maybe he had been wrong. Your grandmother sounds very wise, he said. Alina nodded. She is. As they continued walking, the desert slowly began to change. More plants appeared, their leaves green and healthy. Small birds landed on bushes and chirped softly. The land felt more alive the closer they came to the mountains. Alina paused sometimes to touch a plant or pick up a small stone. She didn't keep anything, she would just hold it for a moment and then place it back carefully, as though showing respect to the land. Daniel watched her with quiet admiration. "You treat everything gently," he said. "My grandmother says the land gives us life, so we should be kind to it," she explained. Daniel nodded. As they walked, Daniel noticed a small trail leading into a cluster of tall trees in the distance. The trees looked healthy and green, almost glowing in the sunlight. Alina pointed toward them. "We should go that way," she said. "There is water ahead." Daniel's face brightened. "Water sounds perfect. Right now." They followed the narrow path until the land opened to reveal a small, clear stream running gently between smooth stones. The sound of the moving water felt calming and peaceful. It was the first real water they had seen in days. Daniel knelt down and cupped his hands to drink. The water was cool and refreshing. Beside him, Alina filled her bottle with care and took small sips. "Thank you for finding this," Daniel said. Alina looked at the stream and smiled softly. "The land brings us what we need." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest. He was learning so much from her lessons he never thought he needed. After they rested, they continued their journey. As midday approached, the sun grew brighter. But the heat felt less intense than before. Daniel felt stronger too. Walking with purpose made each step feel easier. They were only a few miles from the reservation line now. Daniel could feel that something important waited ahead, something big, something that might change the direction of his life. As they walked, Alina suddenly spoke. "Daniel, when we reach my grandmother's place, will you stay for a little while?" Daniel slowed his steps. He hadn't expected that question. He looked at her gentle face, at her hopeful eyes. He felt a tug inside him, something warm, something unfamiliar. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't want to bother anyone." "You won't," she said simply. "My grandmother likes people with quiet hearts." Daniel laughed softly. "Is my heart quiet?" Alina looked at him with the honesty only a child could have. "It is trying to be." Rind, M. Daniel's laughter softened into something thoughtful. He wondered when his heart had grown so loud with worry. Maybe it had been loud for years. Maybe walking with Alina had been the first time he had allowed it to rest. By late afternoon, the air became cooler again. They reached a gentle slope leading toward a wider open space, where the mountains cast long shadows. Alina stopped and looked around, then pointed to a tall tree standing alone. "We can rest there," she said. Daniel followed her to the tree, and they sat in the soft shade. He could feel the quiet of the land around them. It wasn't the empty kind of quiet he used to feel in lonely places. It was a comforting quiet, like the world itself was taking a deep breath. Alina closed her eyes for a moment, enjoying the calm. Daniel watched her. She seemed so young, and yet so strong. He wondered how much courage she had needed to leave home in the first place. "Alina," he said gently, "why did you leave your home? What happened?" She opened her eyes slowly and thought before answering. "Some people wanted me to go to a place far away," she said. "They said I needed new lessons, new rules. But I didn't want to leave my grandmother." Daniel nodded slowly. He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. He already understood enough. She was taken somewhere she didn't belong, away from someone she loved. And she left because her heart was pulling her home. "I'm glad you found your way back," Daniel said. Alina looked at him quietly. "I didn't find it alone." Daniel felt a soft emotion rise in his chest. "I'm glad I could walk with you." "You were meant to," she said. Daniel blinked. "Meant to?" She nodded. "My grandmother says, some paths are chosen for us. We just follow." Daniel looked down at the ground, feeling something shift inside him. Maybe he had been walking this path long before he realized it. As they continued their journey deeper into the evening, Daniel noticed a small wooden structure far in the distance. Smoke rose gently from a fire nearby. Alina's breath caught softly. That is someone's home, she said. Maybe we are close. Daniel felt a growing excitement. They were nearing her people. He walked with renewed strength. As they approached the small home, an older woman stepped outside. She wasn't Alina's grandmother. This woman was younger, perhaps a distant relative. She looked at Daniel and Alina with surprise. "Alina?" the woman called gently. Alina stepped forward. "We are going home," she said softly. The woman looked relieved. She offered them water and a place to rest. Daniel thanked her kindly. They sat near the small fire, warming themselves as the sky darkened. The woman spoke with Alina in gentle tones, then turned to Daniel. "You brought her far," she said with respect in her voice. Daniel shook his head. "She guided me." The woman smiled knowingly. "Yes, she has that way." Later, as they prepared to continue toward the reservation, Daniel felt a strange peace settle over him. He wasn't sure what waited ahead, but he wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, he felt steady. Alina walked beside him, her steps calm and sure, and Daniel realized something deep inside him. He had stopped escaping. He wasn't running from his past anymore. He wasn't trying to disappear. He was walking toward something, toward a place that felt like truth. And maybe, just maybe, toward a future that held more than he ever expected. Daniel stood outside Naya's small home the next morning, feeling the cool air on his face. It was the first morning in a long time when he didn't wake up with the feeling of danger behind him. Instead, he woke to the smell of warm bread and the sound of quiet voices inside the home. For a moment, he just breathed, letting the peacefulness settle into him. It felt unfamiliar, like something he had never allowed himself to feel before. Inside, Alina was helping her grandmother prepare breakfast. Her face looked brighter than it had during their journey. She spoke softly in her language, and Naya answered with a smile that always seemed full of calm and wisdom. Daniel watched them from the doorway, asking himself how something so gentle could have such strength. When Naya noticed him, she waved him in without hesitation, as if he had always been welcome. While they ate, Naya told him that some officials would visit the reservation later that day. They wanted to check on Alina's return and confirm her safety. Daniel felt a slight worry, but Naya placed her hand on his arm and told him that truth did not need to hide. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of many years. Daniel nodded, reminding himself that he had come this far by choosing honesty over running. When the officials arrived, the air grew tense. 2 vehicles stopped outside the community center, and a few people stepped out with folders in their hands. They greeted everyone politely, but Daniel could tell they were here, with a plan already shaped in their minds. They looked at Alina, at Naya, then at him, as if trying to understand his place in the story. Naya spoke first, standing straight and steady, her hands folded in front of her. She explained how Alina had returned on her own, how she was safe, cared for, and surrounded by family. The officials listened, eyebrows rising slightly at her calm confidence. When they asked why Alina ran away in the first place, Naya answered with gentle firmness. She explained that Alina had felt afraid of being separated from her family, afraid of losing the home she knew, and the stories she carried. She said these things not with anger, but with clarity, like someone who carried truth like a stone in her hand, strong, but peaceful. Then one of the officials turned to Daniel. They asked how he found Alina and why he had helped her. Daniel felt his heart beat faster, but he did not look away. He explained the story from the beginning, how he had seen her alone, how he had used his last dollar to buy her food because something inside him had insisted he couldn't walk past her. He told them about their journey, how she had trusted him, how he had learned from her more than he ever expected. The officials asked if he was related to her. He said no. They asked if he wanted anything in return. He said no again. He told them that helping her was the first real thing he had done in a long time. He told them he didn't come for reward or place, only because it felt right. The officials exchanged looks. They were not cold, only cautious. After a long moment, one of them said they needed to complete some paperwork and speak with the tribal council. They asked Naya a few more questions, then closed their folders and prepared to leave. Before getting into their vehicles, one of them returned to Daniel and nodded in quiet respect. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, but it meant something. Daniel understood that sometimes respect is silent but powerful. Once the vehicles were gone, the community seemed to breathe again. Children began playing nearby, and a few neighbors came to check on Naya and Alina. Daniel stood to the side, feeling like an outsider and yet strangely connected. He had done his part, and now he wondered what came next. He expected Naya to thank him and send him on his way, as most people would. But instead, she told him there was another meal waiting inside, if he was hungry. Over the next few days, Daniel stayed longer than he had expected. He helped carry water, fix fences, and gather firewood. The work was simple, but satisfying. He felt useful not because someone was paying him, but because his hands could actually help someone. Alina spent time nearby, sometimes guiding him, sometimes laughing softly at his mistakes. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words always held meaning. At night, Daniel sat outside and listened to the quiet. He thought about his old life, the places he had drifted through, the choices he had made out of fear. For the first time, he saw his past clearly. He realized he had been running from himself, not from other people. He had believed that freedom meant staying unconnected, unbound, always moving. But now he saw that constant movement wasn't freedom, it was loneliness. One evening, Naya joined him outside. She sat beside him, without a sound. After a long silence, she told him that the land remembers every person who walks on it. She said the land knew when someone walked with respect, and when someone walked in fear. She told him that Alina trusted him because she saw in him a heart that wanted to be honest, even when life had made honesty difficult. Daniel listened quietly, unsure what to say. Naya looked at him with eyes that seemed to see everything: his mistakes, his regrets, his hopes. She told him that there was a place for him in the community if he wished to stay for a while. Not forever, not as a promise, but as a chance. A chance to find balance. A chance to let his spirit rest. Daniel felt a warmth rise in his chest. No one had offered him a place like that before. He asked her if she was sure. Naya smiled gently and said that choices made with kindness always open new paths. She said that Alina believed in him, and that sometimes one brave child can help guide a grown man back to himself. That night, Daniel thought for a long time. He stared at the stars above the desert, feeling small but safe. In the morning, he told Naya he wanted to stay for a little while. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because something inside him finally wanted to stop running. He wanted to learn. He wanted to help. He wanted to be part of something real. Days turned into a quiet pattern. He worked with the community, learned small parts of their language, and listened to stories of their history. Alina showed him how to read the land, how the shadows told time, how the wind carried messages, how even silence was a kind of language. She taught him that freedom was not about escaping, but about belonging. It was about living honestly, choosing kindness, and respecting others. One afternoon, while walking near the edge of the village, Daniel realized he no longer felt like a stranger. The people greeted him warmly. He had tasks to do, places to be, and faces he knew. The worry that had once lived constantly in his chest had faded. He felt lighter, as if a weight he had carried for years had finally left him. And it all began with one small choice: spending his last dollar on a girl who needed help. That simple moment had changed the direction of his life. It had led him to a place where freedom was not a distant dream but a daily practice. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom to choose truth, compassion, and connection. As the days continued, Daniel knew he would not stay forever. Life would eventually pull him forward again. But he also knew he would leave with something he never had before: a sense of direction, a sense of peace, and a sense of who he truly wanted to be. The land, the people, Naya, and especially Alina, had given him something priceless: a new understanding of freedom. Not the kind he once chased, but the kind that grows from courage, kindness, and belonging. And in helping the young Apache girl find her home, Daniel had found one too inside himself.